You did this. My son is barely alive and it's entirely your fault. Karen, your son stole my car. If anything, I should be the one taking legal action against you. I always knew Karen lived in a version of reality that suited only her. But I never imagined a day would come when her delusions would cost me nearly everything I owned. It all began the day my new car arrived. My dream car, an Audi RS7. Something I'd worked years to earn. Overtime shifts, canceled vacations, restless nights running numbers. When it finally pulled up, gleaming and humming softly in my driveway, it felt like the universe finally paying me back. Neighbors gathered around, phones raised, kids circling it in awe, grown men nodding in quiet respect. I enjoyed the moment without making a show of it. That's when I noticed someone who clearly wasn't impressed. Karen, our HOA president, stood rigid near the sidewalk, wearing a smile that never once touched her eyes. The kind of smile people wear when they're already scheming. Standing close beside her was her son, Brad, lingering far closer to the car than necessary, staring at it longer than anyone else. His eyes traced every line of it like he was studying a blueprint, not admiring a car. I shook off the unease, told myself I was overthinking it, and assumed he was simply drawn to the engineering. I'd lived in this neighborhood long enough to know exactly how Karen operated. She valued rules more than people and power more than logic. She carried her clipboard like a weapon and treated fines like trophies. Still, I never imagined a car could awaken something this dark in her. That evening, I parked the RS7 carefully, locked it up, and went inside, completely unaware that my purchase had already become someone else's fixation. Over the following days, murmurs followed me everywhere. Some neighbors offered quiet congratulations, while others jokingly warned me that Karen despised anything that outshone her. I laughed it off, certain my hard work couldn't possibly offend anyone. I even double-checked the HOA guidelines. Nothing prohibited nice vehicles. Everything I owned was compliant, legal, spotless. What I failed to realize was that once envy crept in, Karen stopped caring about rules altogether. It was never about policy. It was about control, and my car had disturbed her sense of it. A few days after the purchase, odd patterns began forming around my driveway. Brad seemed to be everywhere all at once. He'd linger by the curb whenever I came home. He'd pause his bike rides right beside my fence. He'd stare without blinking, and every glance felt heavier than simple curiosity. When I washed the car, he hovered close by. When I covered it for the night, he'd wander back later. His questions started sounding rehearsed. How fast does it go? What year is it exactly? Does it unlock on its own? I gave vague answers, uneasy but polite. Then Karen started showing up too. She pretended it was all coincidence. It never was. She walked her dog past my house repeatedly. She scrutinized my trash bins with obsessive attention. One afternoon, she blocked my driveway entirely. Brad standing beside her, clipboard in hand, smile already loaded. She claimed my bin lid wasn't shut all the way. Another fine, another display of power. I kept my cool and simply decided to pull the car into the garage first. That decision mattered more than I realized at the time. As I drove in, Brad's eyes tracked every single movement. The garage door lowered slowly behind me. I punched in my code without bothering to shield the keypad. Karen kept talking the entire time, loudly. Brad stood close enough to catch every beep. I never thought twice about it. Why would I? He was just a kid. That assumption would come back to haunt me. Over the following week, Brad's questions grew more pointed. He asked if the car was keyless. He asked whether the alarm system ever malfunctioned. He asked if garage codes ever reset automatically. I brushed some of it off with a laugh. Others I simply ignored. Karen, meanwhile, had gone quiet. No more fines, no more lectures. That silence unsettled me more than her usual outbursts. Neighborhood chatter picked back up too. Someone mentioned Brad bragging about it at school. Someone else joked he'd probably take the car for a spin one day. I dismissed all of it. I trusted the locks. I trusted the walls. I trusted that parents raised their kids to know better. That trust turned out to be badly misplaced. One night, I checked the garage twice before bed. Everything looked exactly as it should. The car sat there quietly. I slept soundly, with no idea that someone had already committed my entire security setup to memory. One evening, an HOA meeting dragged on far past its usual length, the kind Karen relished because it gave her full, uninterrupted control of the room. She stood at the front, lecturing about lawn edges, driveway alignment, and fines nobody could recall earning. People scrolled their phones, sighed, shifted in their seats. But one thing stood out to me. Brad wasn't there. He usually sat nearby whenever Karen held court, but his seat was empty that night. I brushed it off, assuming he was home glued to a screen somewhere. Midway through her lecture, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Annoyed, I stepped outside to answer. The woman on the line sounded frantic, talking fast. She said there had been a serious accident involving my Audi. I nearly laughed, telling her my car was safely parked in my garage. There was a pause. Then she told me the car had actually been spotted earlier out on the highway and was now totaled, miles from home. My stomach dropped. As I stood there trying to process it, Karen's phone rang inside the meeting hall. Through the glass, I watched her confident posture crumble instantly. The color drained from her face. She bolted for the exit without a word, nearly knocking a chair over on her way out. The meeting fell into chaos, but I was already sprinting to my car. The crash site wasn't anywhere near our neighborhood. It was far beyond familiar roads, somewhere Brad had absolutely no reason to be. When I arrived, my RS7 was barely recognizable. Wrapped around a guardrail, the entire front end crushed, smoke still curling into the air. Police lights flashed everywhere. A small crowd of strangers stood watching. Paramedics moved around the wreckage. Brad sat on the curb, bruised and shaking, wrapped in a blanket, eyes fixed on the pavement. The officers filled in the rest. Brad had memorized my garage code, and the keyless ignition handled the rest. He hadn't just taken it for a harmless loop around the block. He'd driven it clear out of town, chasing speed, his confidence far outweighing his skill. He lost control. I stood there completely numb, watching years of effort reduced to twisted scrap metal. Karen arrived shortly after, frantic and loud, already trying to pin blame on faulty technology, on me, on anything and anyone she could think of. The officers cut her off and continued documenting the scene. As statements were being taken, one officer mentioned traffic cameras positioned along the route Brad had driven. Karen went rigid. That reaction alone told me this wasn't going to end quietly. Not even close. The very next morning, before Brad had even been released from the hospital, a process server showed up at my door. Karen was suing me. She was alleging negligence, unsafe property practices, emotional distress, and something bizarre about enticing a minor with luxury machinery. It read like satire written by someone who'd never once encountered reality. She was demanding damages, medical expenses, and compensation for her son's supposed trauma. I let out one disbelieving laugh, then picked up the phone and called my lawyer. From there, everything reversed course fast. Police reports confirmed the theft. Security footage showed Brad entering my garage, unmistakably clear. Traffic cameras tracked his entire route, well beyond any posted speed limit. Witnesses at a gas station placed him bragging about what he'd done. The moment subpoenas started landing, Karen's tone shifted completely. Her bravado evaporated overnight. Depositions uncovered text messages where she joked about Brad borrowing the car. HOA emails surfaced showing her threatening additional fines unless I dropped my insurance claim. Neighbors who once stayed quiet began speaking up. The board suspended her pending a full investigation. Court turned into a spectacle. Karen cycled through tears, then shouting, then blaming faulty technology all over again. None of it landed with the judge. My case was dismissed outright, and counterclaims followed. Insurance covered part of the loss, but Karen and Brad were ultimately held liable for the remainder. The HOA board voted unanimously to strip her of the presidency after auditors discovered misused funds on top of everything else. Brad was charged with vehicle theft and reckless driving. Karen tried painting herself as a victim of persecution. It didn't work. Restitution orders stacked up one after another. Fines, legal fees, mandatory counseling, community service. Her reputation crumbled faster than my engine ever had. People stopped waving when she walked by. Doors quietly shut as she approached. The neighborhood, for the first time in a long while, finally exhaled. Weeks later, I stood in my empty driveway. The garage sat silent. The RS7 was gone, but something else had taken its place. Peace. Justice didn't roar like an engine, but it landed with far more weight. Karen lost the control she'd clung to so tightly. Brad learned that consequences don't reset the way garage codes do. The end.